In 2019, Disney experienced one of its greatest years ever. Multiple films crossed the billion-dollar mark at the box office, and the year capped off with the launch of its own streaming platform to rival Netflix, what we all know as Disney+. This vast service gave away to audiences access to classic hits from the past while introducing bold new shows, starting with The Mandalorian. That series was honestly stronger than The Rise of Skywalker was, which also hit $1 billion at the end of that same year, where its first episode felt truly impressive at the time. But today, in January 2026, that era of consistent billion-dollar blockbusters have fluctuated. Disney still outperforms most studios, but the landscape has shifted dramatically with the arrival of Disney Plus right as COVID-19 disrupted everything. Their entire strategy starting from 2020, blending theatrical releases with streaming, collided with the changing world, leading to mixed audiences' feelings, a somewhat muted reputation among cultural debates and question of overall quality, yet how Disney still remains at the top. And when it comes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the story is different. 2019 also marked the peak with Avengers Endgame, the emotional culmination of over a decade of storytelling, and following that up proved incredibly challenging. Like, how do you top an end of that era? At first, many thought expanding into Disney Plus would be the perfect way to keep the momentum going, especially someone like me, where I did thought Endgame was the peak, and going forward, I really don't want to watch Marvel films anymore. Where doing TV shows was a better, intimate way to make character-driven stories. And for a while, that seemed true. The standout that kicked all of it off exactly 5 years ago this month was a series called Wandavision, where 2 years after the launch of the service, Marvel Studios wanted to take a bold creative risk with their first Disney Plus show, obviously one that focuses on the characters of Wanda Maximoff and the Vision. And Wandavision was designed to be an innovative homage to classic American sitcoms, evolving through decades of TV styles while also delving deeply into Wanda Maximoff's grief after losing Vision in Infinity War, and the effects post-Endgame. The goal was to explore themes of loss and denial in a fresh way. What is grief if not love persevering? Which became an iconic line, while rewarding longtime fans of the MCU with connections and surprises. Where in a brief overview, the story follows Wanda and Vision living an idyllic suburban life in the town of Westview, New Jersey. But as strange anomalies appear in the show, it's slowly revealed that Wanda had unconsciously created a new reality-altering hex bubble to cope with her trauma, trapping the townspeople and conjuring a new version of Vision that we didn't know at first. Outside forces including Monica Rambeau, Darcy Lewis, and FBI agent Jimmy Woo investigate and lead to confrontations with Agatha Harkness, and a heartbreaking finale where Wanda confronts her pain, dismantles that hex, and embraces her destiny as the Scarlet Witch, leading to greater films that are honestly actually more disappointing. And 5 years later, WandaVision is regarded as one of the MCU's strongest and most innovative entries. Still today, most people praise its creative format, emotional depth, and standout performances, especially by Elizabeth and Paul Bettany, and how it perfectly bridged the post-Endgame world. It's often called the high point of Phase 4, with rewatches remaining to be popular and many viewing it as aging beautifully, depending on who you look. Heartfelt and influential, and a creative swing that paid off. The upcoming Vision Quest is arriving later on, is framed as the conclusion to this WandaVision trilogy, alongside Agatha All Along, showcasing that lasting legacy. And to be frank with you, I really did not watch Agatha All Along. I just did not feel interested. Again, and mentioning something like that, something like WandaVision is also not without its critiques, even seen by the second show with The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, as that series went on and Marvel started getting muted. Some felt the finale of this show was underwhelming, focusing too much on setting up future stories like the unresolved White Vision arc that's supposed to probably be in this next show, and the later projects that didn't fully honor its emotional groundwork. Notably, in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, drew criticism for rushing Wanda's arc into villainy with the Darkhold via corruption, sidelining nuanced grief exploration from the WandaVision series, and then her supposed death according to canon, where the beginning of this show highlighted the MCU's post-Endgame phases, inconsistency compared to the tight storytelling of phases 1 through 3. With some decisions feel like missteps in the character development and interconnected payoffs. But overall, with the thoughts of the show, the positives still outweigh the negatives. WandaVision not only launched the MCU streaming era, but also proved Marvel can evolve beyond bigger crossovers, even if the road had been uneven, and the one I still advocate for this day. As the very first MCU series on Disney+, Wandavision did something truly unique. It took full advantage of the streaming format to tell a smaller, more domesticated story, one focused on the intimate character moments of grief and everyday life, in a way that a 2-hour theatrical movie simply couldn't accommodate from before. And of course, at the same time, with where the series goes on, it still carries that signature MCU flair with superhero stakes and connections. It still is that same MCU story that you know takes place in it, but also with a funny twist that it makes it feel like a parody of the series from before, making it a serialized television show that could expand the universe in a fresh, personal direction. One of the greatest strengths of this show is how it's built around classic American sitcoms. Early episodes recreate the look, feel, and tone of different decades of television history, right down to the aspect ratio, the camera lenses, lighting, and even the laugh tracks. This, of course, wasn't just clever homages, it was deeply tied into Wanda's character. Growing up in the war-torn Sokovia, Wanda and her family found comfort watching bootleg DVDs of the American sitcoms, especially The Dick Van Dyke Show, which became her favorite. In one poignant flashback, young Wanda insists on watching a specific episode during a family night, of course with the war-torn outside, believing that there's something more to life than their hardships, a dream of normalcy, humor, and happiness that these shows represented. And after the blip and the events of Endgame, in her overwhelming grief, she subconsciously recreates them as an escape, a perfect suburban fantasy with vision where pain doesn't exist. It takes all the lessons she learned from her life that we see later on in that episode and puts them through each individual episode as that series. But even as we notice from the start, because it is Wanda and Vision appearing, subtle cracks appear. We can analyze, even while knowing nothing of the show, that something doesn't feel right. Something is deeply wrong beneath the polished sitcom surface. Another brilliant layer is the fake commercials that interrupt the broadcast, and over time, with theories actually playing out, these weren't random. They're subconscious manifestations of Wanda's deepest traumas, replaying key painful events from her life in disguised form. As the episodes progress towards the present day, the ads grow more darker, subtly signaling that Wanda's denial is fraying as reality creeps much closer. It is just a reflection of herself and her fear. And what I would like to do is just praise on the moments of what these initial episodes back into the sitcom era shows us. As we first begin, we know that it's filmed in black and white, with a live studio audience. These episodes pay direct homages to The Dick Van Dyke Show and I Love Lucy. The opening credits, the sets, and even the commercial breaks mimic the style perfectly, like we're back into the 50s and 60s. Inside Westview, Wanda and Vision played the ideal newlywed couple, hosting the boss for dinner, performing a talent show, just like simple sitcom fun that you don't question until the glitches emerge. A helicopter in color, a voice on the radio asking who is doing this to you, Wanda, and a mysterious figure in a beekeeper suit rising from the sewer. Again, you see the clever in the commercials back in episode 1. Toastmate 2000 by Stark Industries, a toaster with persistent red lighting and beeping, echoing the same unexploded Stark bomb that killed Wanda's parents and left her trapped waiting for it to detonate. Like, when you see something like that, that is strictly pure genius. To actually reference a future event in the show and stuff that happened in the timeline in Wanda's life in the past Avengers films, and disguise it as the ads that would play on TV in between these eras of TV shows is just something that speaks on a different level, both in terms of what we normally watch in sitcoms. We relax with family, we laugh at a show, but we also see what the ads speak to us. Of course, they're trying to sell us something, but in the context of WandaVision, they're not doing just that, but they're trying to show you something. They're trying to show you the soul of Wanda. In the 70s episode 3, the show then transitions to full color, drawing heavily from the Brady Bunch series and of course focusing on Wanda's pregnancy suddenly appearing and progressing at supernatural speeds, delivering twins in a single day, fitting the era's warmth and the wholesome family sitcom vibe. But in this episode, the facade starts crumbling more. Wanda accidentally reveals her powers to her neighbor Herb, and when Geraldine mentions Pietro's death at the hands of Ultron, Wanda snaps, revealing her true self that we all know, expelling her from the Hex, where we do know that she is Monica Rambeau, the child of Maria from Captain Marvel. And episode 4 finally steps outside of this program, we interrupt this program, and we go back to the real modern MCU timeline as is, after Endgame. And of course, tying us back into the post-Endgame events where she got blipped, of course dusting away, but appearing after her mother died. Monica investigates the missing town of Westview and then gets pulled into the Hex herself, becoming Geraldine in that episode. At the same time, we got other agents from past Marvel shows like Jimmy Woo from the Ant-Man and the Wasp and Darcy Lewis from the Thor films, and tied into who she reports to this point, acting director Tyler Hayward, a cold, pragmatic leader whose motives quickly feel questionable. Together in this point, they solve and analyze that the broadcast leaking from the Hex showcases a sitcom that she created and begins to piece together that Wanda is at the center of this. Something is happening to her. And at this point we go back into the Westview and we see the style shifting yet again, going from one era to the next to the iconic 80s with shows like Full House, Family Ties, or Growing Pains, whatever you could think of. With of course, the direct tie-in that Elizabeth Olsen's sister starred in one of those. The twins rapidly age up to 10 years old, and the episode plays like a classic very special episode with lessons about responsibility and family. Of course, that is another key difference about why WandaVision is so great, because each episode frames it back into the sitcom show that each episode is teaching you about something about family and loss and growth in a subtle subconscious way that fits through Wanda's vision. Vision also grows increasingly suspicious in this episode. At work, he awakens his co-worker Norm from the spell, revealing that the townspeople's mental anguish and that they're being controlled, that their thoughts are not their own. Outside the Hex, Sword debates on how to handle Wanda, while Monica, now expelled and back into the real world after her confrontation with Wanda, begins showing signs that passing through the barrier has changed her on a cellular level. Another important thing with here in episode 5 is how when we enter the 80s, we also go back and forth between the real world and the TV show now, The Life Inside the Hex, because we now know the full details of what happened from beforehand, and now the series shifts to both eras, which some can say is mixed because the stronger suit is just the focus on the series itself, like we're watching that, but then we have to go back into the real world and know that yes, this still is an MCU series. Also by this point, you go back to the commercials like Lagos paper towels, for when you make a mess you didn't mean to, of course directly referencing the accidental explosion in Lagos from Civil War that killed innocents and fueled Wanda's guilt. This stretch of episodes represents WandaVision at its creative peak, masterful blending of nostalgia and unease, impeccable performances, and a slow burn mystery that rewarded patient viewers. The sitcom framework and those haunting commercials weren't just gimmicks, they were essential storytelling, subtly underscoring Wanda's trauma as her created reality edges closer to the collapse. And by episode 5, you see that point because she went back and warning Hayward for what they did because she wanted her reality to stay as is. She was fully aware she stepped out of it, making questions. The sitcom facade begins to crack more dramatically after episode 5. Wanda's world in Westview expanded, pulling in more people and escalating the chaos both inside and out, where the creative risks continued to pay off in so many ways. But this is also where some viewers, looking back 5 years later, feel the show started to slowly first show the signs of the broader MCU challenges, prioritizing setups for future stories over resolving the intimate emotional journey it had built so carefully. Of course, starting with episode 6, the style shifts to the late 90s and early 2000s, primarily paying homage to Malcolm in the Middle with fourth wall breaks, chaotic family energy, quick editing, cutting, and the mischievous cool uncle vibe. Of course, with the big shot coming from the end of the last episode with Pietro, recast in this film surprisingly as Evan Peters from of course the Fox X-Men films. His arrival felt thrilling, a meta nod to the multiverse possibilities post-Disney Fox merger and of course the multiverse saga that they were building today, and a fun way to mess with Wanda's and our own expectations, according to Kevin Feige. Of course, something that became later disappointing and later written off as a Ralph Boner joke, unfortunately. And then we move on to the modern episode, paying homage fully into our era. Mockumentary-style interviews like Modern Family with touches of The Office. Again, mentioning Modern Family the most because that was an ABC series and this is Disney. Wanda, depressed and losing control, lets household items glitch back and forth from their previous decade's designs. And the episode that delivered us the iconic reveal through the earworm music song Agatha All Along. Of course, where Agnes is Agatha Harkness, the powerful witch who's been pulling all the strings, and of course in some ways a mentor or a villain to Wanda in the comics. Where I think Agatha All Along as a song, of course, again I said I didn't watch the show so I don't know, it was very much the peak of the show itself, written similar to the theme song for the Munsters and the Addams Family theme, and of course written by the couple known as Robert and Kristen Anderson Lopez, who we all know was involved for Disney. They wrote songs in Coco and they wrote songs, the most popular songs like Let It Go and Frozen, or of course the other songs in Frozen 2, as I'm sure you're aware. where the point is, it's referencing all those other theme songs of shows and sitcoms in so many ways that gives them both into the old but also into the new, but something that's so catchy, as we all know. It went viral after appearing in the episode and became a classic hit. It's just something that you could see them doing perfectly because, of course, they wrote Let It Go, and the theme was just very repetitive and catchy. But episode 8 destroys the sitcom format completely. In this part and up towards the ending, we reveal the truth of the hex and everything. Agatha forces Wanda to relive all the traumatic memories of her family's life, again referencing those events that led her to build the sitcom we all knew. The Dick Van Dyke Show watching in Sokovia for comfort and hope, Hydra's experiments, falling in love with Vision, and post-Endgame grief leading her to create the hex we all knew, and also getting Agatha's origin in 1693 Salem. But one of the most important things to note, the reason why I wanted to create this, comes in the flashback in the Avengers compound, where Wanda, mourning Pietro just after the events of Age of Ultron, feels a wave of sorrow threatening to drown her. Vision, an android who has never known loss, offers some unexpected wisdom.
What is grief? If not love, persevering.
This line captures why Wanda fell so deeply for Vision. Here we see a synthetic being grappling with human emotion, articulating the beauty and the pain of love in a way that validated her heartbreak. It showed that even something without a human heart, Vision could understand the perseverance of love, making their bond feel profound, real, and earned. This is just something that represents the best of what the MCU could do, where you could see from an android understand what grief is to us, how we feel sadness. We feel sadness because we love the people we lost. It is the core emotion that makes us human. And learning that from someone like Vision helps us deeply, and why Wanda connected so well. That the truth of her being a being of chaos magic or one of the most powerful Marvel characters is because she is a being who is emotional, one who really values love, and why Vision is the one to do it. But on the other hand, on the other side, the Evan Peters twist ultimately deflated into a pun. Pietro was just Ralph Boner, a random resident under Agatha's control in this universe, and of course involved in that show. And 5 years on, this remains divisive, clever misdirection for some, but emblematic of the MCU's pitfall for others, building massive hype and only for it to be subverted without any meaningful payoff, which perfectly describes a lot of the multiverse saga we are in today. Like Kang, the most disappointing thing ever, where you were going to actually make a movie called the Kang Wars, but now you're just putting Doom because the previous candidate was involved in some controversy. But now we move on to the finale and its aftermath. The final episodes brought everything to a head. Massive action, heartbreaking goodbyes, and a spectacle-filled conclusion that felt both earned and a bit overstuffed. Wanda, at this point in the series finale, fully embraces her destiny as the Scarlet Witch, clashing with Agatha in the Sky Magic duel. The family confronts the military, finally led by antagonist SWORD director Tyler Hayward, who weaponizes Vision's body and reactivates the all-white Cataract version purely as a tool. The emotional core shines in the dual Vision showdown and Wanda dismantling the Hex, saying tearful goodbyes to her conjured family, about showcasing who's the real person or not, which again, in Wandavision, isn't just about Wanda, but also about Vision. Of course, bringing back the weapon that Hayward tried to use, but revealing through the ship of Theseus that he is the Vision. Only he needs the memories to showcase that. The finale delivers this spectacle, emotional closure for Wanda's grief arc, and strong performances, yet it still left more to be desired for some. Heavy on setups, White Vision, Monica's powers, the Dark Hold, all of which were featured in future movies and show, yet still lighter on resolving threads. And 5 years later, these setups highlight the multiverse saga's inconsistencies. White Vision leads to the upcoming Vision Quest, Wanda's Dark Hold arc of study led to her controversial villain turn in Multiverse Madness, and supporting characters scattered in the background roles across later projects, like Jimmy Woo back to 1-second cameo in Ant-Man 3, and of course Darcy Lewis, a 2-second cameo in Thor: Love and Thunder. Overall, WandaVision remains to be a bold, successful experiment, the best use of Disney Plus's format while exploring real MCU aftermath from Endgame and Infinity War. The issue still lies in the broader saga. Too many loose arcs, rushed turns, and standalone stories that still didn't fully connect. that it showcased what the MCU was at this point in time. A good aftermath conclusion, but a wobbly, untrustworthy epilogue. And looking back on it now in January of 2026, WandaVision still stands as one of the best that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has produced on Disney+, or as a whole. Its creative ambition and its emotional depth and use of innovative streaming formats still remains to be untouched and unmatched in many ways. It took real risks, blending heartfelt character study with meta commentary on television itself, and for the most part, those risks paid off beautifully. Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany delivered career-best performances with the sitcom homages that were both clever and meaningful, and the exploration of grief that resonated deeply with the audiences coming out of a real, difficult real-world period. Of course, COVID-19, the same as the post-blip in Endgame. But the show also, perhaps unintentionally, highlighted the real challenges of what came next. Endgame wasn't just a cinematic event, it was the conclusion of a highly anticipated, meticulously built 22-film arc. And once you reach that kind of peak, there's no real going back. Everything after, again as I just said, is epilogue, an expanded universe that, by design, can never truly end. The unfortunate reality of those shared worlds is that the story just keeps going, with new threads, new characters, new stakes, and whether the audiences is fully aboard or not. WandaVision offered a promising path forward, smaller scale, character-driven stories that could breathe in a serialized format, one that didn't need to top the cosmic showdown, or prove the MCU could evolve beyond the endless escalation. Yet in the years since, many feel Marvel squandered that potential. Inconsistent follow-up through setups, rushed arcs, and overwhelming volume of content led to the fatigue we are in today. Not every viewer wanted or is able to keep up indefinitely. The excitement that was once universally felt for some has turned into selective viewing or stepping away from it entirely. This doesn't diminish what WandaVision achieved. It remains to be the high point, but a reminder of what the MCU is capable of when it slows down, takes creative swings, and trusts its characters. And even with the uneven road that it followed, its legacy endures, influential, rewatchable, and still deeply loved. I'm all done now. Goodbye.